passion, focus, discipline. This is the Zero Excuses podcast. Each and every week, we talk to high-performing, inspirational athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders. We ask powerful questions to extract their tools, strategies, and life lessons for you to crush your excuses, to break out of your comfort zone, and accomplish your ambitious dreams and goals. Here's your host, Kenyon Zitska.
All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. You know, I'm really stoked for today's episode because it's, we've all heard the term the Dadbod, and we all think that, that's just from, hey, we get lazy and we lack motivation after our children are born. We don't have enough time. Things are crazy. But our guest today, Alex Van Houten, is here to explain to us scientifically why that actually happens. There is a scientific reason why dads get the dad bod or become more, susceptible to getting the dad bod. So if you're one of those guys out there that, might look in the mirror and, hey, might not be happy with what you see, there's a scientific reason for it. And there's a definite reason for it. And today's guest, like I said, is here to talk about those reasons and talk about some ways we can fight back against the dad bod and regain control over our bodies and our minds and our overall health after we have kids. And I can attest to the fact that, it was tough after having my daughter, but, I encourage everybody out there, especially the dads who are listening out there, to take some notes today and really take what Alex has to say to heart. And, definitely check out what Alex has to offer. We've got all the links to what he's got going on in the show notes, so definitely check those out. But before we get into today's episode with Alex, as always, got a couple quick reminders for you guys. Number one, would appreciate it if you went over to iTunes and left us a rating and review. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, also share this with a friend or family member, coworker, whatever, someone who would get tremendous value out of the topics we cover. Would appreciate it if you shared it with them. Number two, if you want to get more involved with these topics and these strategies and these tools that we talk about, we have a few ways for you guys to do that. We've got a free way for you to do it in our closed Facebook group. You can join the Zero Excuses Facebook group for free, kenyonzitska.com/group. It'll take you right to the Facebook page, and all you got to do is click the join button. Eliminate all excuses for you guys there. Number two is we have a very tight-knit, closed mastermind group, the Infinite Results Mastermind group. We talk about some loose topics every single month. We talk about some of the topics that we cover here on the podcast at a very deep level, and we talk about how we are implementing those. And you won't find any cookie cutter solutions. You won't find silly little PDFs and stuff. We do have a few of those, but we certainly don't focus on those by any means. We help each other create customized solutions, and if you want to get involved, you can apply at kenyonzitska.com/results. And if that's not quite enough for you, I have a few openings in my discipline coaching program. If you want to work one-on-one exclusively with me and want that one-on-one accountability and want to really fast forward your results, you can apply to be a part of that program, kenyonzitska.com/discipline. But I certainly don't take everyone in that program, and you also have to be willing to put the time, the energy, the resources behind getting those results. So like I said, I don't take everyone. And if you're interested, the slots do close up relatively fast. So certainly, don't hesitate to apply. All right, guys, that's all I got. Let's hop into today's conversation. Alex, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to join us here on the Zero Excuses podcast. Excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the reason I'm excited to have you on is that, you're serving a very important niche, and, your podcast, Defining Dad Bod, is something that I think is sorely needed today. And, when I became a father, I kind of found myself falling into that trap of letting my physical fitness and nutrition slack off a little bit. Thankfully, I've caught that a little bit here and have improved that over the past few years. But, like I said, I'm really excited to have you on. Why don't you give yourself a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll start diving into some of the topics that you're passionate about here.
Well, thanks, brother. And I'm excited to be on your show, No Excuses. Something about the name of it just cuts right to the heart of the matter, does it not?
Absolutely.
So I've been in the fitness industry for 13 years. I've had the opportunity to train everybody from little kids all the way up to 82-year-old females who were stuck in a wheelchair and didn't know what to do in the gym, even from their wheelchair. And so I've had a large swath of experience that came out of being interested in orthopedic surgery. So I went to school for psychology and chemical engineering, which you don't see combined very often. And that was tied together with a pre-med focus, which you also don't see very often.
Yeah.
And while I worked in the hospitals getting ready for my MCAT and hanging out with doctors, I found out that doctors don't really like their jobs and patients don't want to be there, or at least more specifically surgeons. And so in that realization, I continued with my side business, which was personal training at the time. And through that, I've had the opportunity to really dive into what the real world person experiences when they take on health and fitness goals. And that was great. I had a blast with that. I've gotten to work with large multinational corporations, own my own business, that sort of thing. But then I became a father, and that really turned my entire world on its head. And I realized that my fitness had to stand for something more than me. And it was the first time in my life that I'd actually struggled with my personal health and fitness. I'd be driving home from work and I'd stop at the gas station and get one of those like 99-cent crap brownies full of sugar and MSG and who else knows what. And I'd eat a Pop-Tart on the way to work. And I'm like, who am I? Like, this isn't me. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And so I started diving into the research and found that dad's body goes through a ridiculous amount of change. I know we talk about mom's body a lot, and any ladies listening, thank you for being a mom. You sacrifice a lot more body-wise than we do. But there's something to this biological underpinning of dad bod. And so I dove into that and started helping dads while I helped myself. And it's been a really, really powerful movement for me.
Awesome. And, that is a very, very interesting background, but I could definitely see the connection between psychology and chemical engineering. There's a lot of hormones and a lot of chemical reactions that are going on within the brain to kind of drive our mental well-being and whatnot. So I definitely could see that connection. But
yeah, chemical engineering as a study generally focuses on like the petroleum industry, or at least at the time that I was going to school for it. What I found fascinating was the actual chemical and biochemical reactions that take place on the level of the brain and how that drives our behavior, and how simple explanation or simple idea of this is, if your phone goes off right now in the middle of this conversation, dopamine's going to spike, pow, and hit you right in those reward centers. And you're going to go, should I check my phone? And then you're going to go, I'm talking to Alex, probably not. And there's actually a deep underlying chemical messenger system that really drives many of the things we think on a regular basis. And so the two of those were really tied together.
Awesome. So let's dive into, you mentioned that dad bods go through chemical changes and changes, when you have a child as well. Let's start diving into that because, listening to your content before, that was very, very interesting, and it's not talked about a lot.
Yeah. It's obvious that mom goes through a lot of physical and hormonal changes during the process of pregnancy. Then there's breastfeeding. Then there's, getting your body back, quote unquote, after the fact. And then women have the fun, menopausal years and whatnot. And I say fun very, very loosely because that was the vast majority of people that I got to work with in my past 13 years of experience. But when it comes to dad, we don't talk much about what happens to dad's body, but there's real credence to the idea that there's a biological reason for dad bod. And so what you find when you dive into the research, and it blew me away, man. It really blew me away because I read a lot before my son was born, the expectant father and the expectant mother, and, how to prepare financially and emotionally and physically and sexually and all those things about like what happens when a baby enters your world. And not a single one of them mentioned what happens to dad's testosterone. And this is a very, very robust finding in the research. As soon as a baby's born, As soon as that new infant enters your arms and you're hanging out with that infant, in the first 2 weeks, your testosterone will drop to the lowest it's ever been since adolescence. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter how much you're involved with the baby itself. As soon as you hang out with that baby, your testosterone drops. And researchers don't know why, by the way. They don't know why. There's a couple people who would postulate that it's pheromones, something about mom having a baby. You smell that. I don't know what it is. The point is your testosterone is going to plummet. And as a man, that's a big deal because testosterone is the underlying hormonal system for you feeling like yourself, would be the best way to put it. Your aggressiveness, your confidence, your ability to muddle through depression, for instance. And that has a cascade of effects throughout a man's early years as a new father. And then what's really fascinating about this is dad's testosterone does not come back to normal, or at least not as the researchers found, until the youngest child is age 4.
Oh, wow.
So there's really a large span of time where if dad's doing anything else from a health and fitness perspective, for instance, sleeping like garbage or drinking too much bourbon or not regulating blood sugar well, if dad's not doing some things or doing some awful things that are making this worse, then it really sets the stage for Dadbod on a natural level.
Wow. Like I said, this does not get talked about a lot. And my daughter just turned 4 myself. And it's really ironic that you mentioned some of these things, because I definitely feel, at the point that I'm, I don't know, more aggressive now. I feel, I actually feel a lot better. I'm about to turn 40 this year, and I feel better than I felt than I probably in my late 20s. So so maybe there's something to that. And man, that's kind of blowing my mind here. But
it blows a lot of guys' mind, to be honest, when you start talking to guys about this and you see the lights come on. And I have a client right now who has 3 kids, all under the age of 5. Okay. And he has not felt like himself in 5 years. And he sends me his data on like what his weight has looked like fluctuation wise. He talks about, what it feels like to be at work and some of the anxiety and depression that he deals with and stuff. And then he's like, I got this report, my testosterone's low. I don't know if I should be getting testosterone replacement therapy and stuff. And I heard your show. And so he comes to talk to me, and I'm talking to him about this natural process that happens. And he's like, holy crap, man, you just described the last 5 years of my life. And here I thought I was a bad dad and didn't like my kids. And that's brutal, but when you're really real with yourself about how it feels to go through those changes, you wonder what's wrong with you. And that's intense.
Yeah, man. So what are some of the ways that we can, obviously we want to try and exercise and live as healthy as possible. Is there anything that we can do to maybe mitigate this before we have kids? Is there anything that we can do to maybe make this effect less severe?
That's a great question. And that's something that I've devoted a large portion of this movement toward, not just before kids, but let's say you're in the thick of it, right? You're feeling like garbage. You're like, well, it doesn't matter what I could have done before now. I'm here. And, is there any hope for me? So truth be told, there are a ridiculous number of things we can do from an exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle perspective to affect our hormone systems.
Yeah.
And what's powerful about this, and another thing you won't hear much about, is that the hormone systems are deeply interconnected. I'll give you an example. So let's say that I told you that consuming alcohol more than 2 drinks a day will cut your testosterone in half. Actually, that's not what it shows in the research. It'll actually reduce the size of your gonads by half, which, that can't be great. No. By the way, it can't be great to reduce the size of your gonads in half if testosterone is important to you. Let's say I told you that. And that's true, by the way. If you're consuming a certain amount of alcohol, it's a by weight kind of thing. It actually reduces the density of the cellular tissue there to produce testosterone. But you go, okay, I need to cut out alcohol. That'll increase my testosterone production. And you do that. And 2 weeks later, you're like, yeah, it really didn't make that much of a difference. And if I dive a little bit deeper and I find that you're not sleeping well, Like you're waking up several times a night, you're drinking caffeine at 7 p.m. and then expecting to fall asleep, but then you scroll through your phone until 1 a.m. and then that's when you fall asleep. Well, that's your cortisol system. And your cortisol system is the system that biologically keeps you from getting eaten by mountain lions. And today that's not really a thing. So maybe it spikes while you're in traffic. Maybe it happens when you get an email from your boss that you're not particularly excited about, or when you first get home and the kids run at you and you're like, guys, I just need a little time to decompress. That's your cortisol system. And if cortisol is out of whack, what happens is it starts drawing resources from your testosterone system. And so there are things that we can do lifestyle-wise to affect each hormone system. But the most important thing that we can do is affect the most important systems first. And that has a downstream effect on the hormone system.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have to start taking care of one thing at a time until we start getting this cumulative effect. Am I understanding that right?
You got it 100%. And in fact, when I coach clients through the Defining Dadbod Protocol, I bring them through, we get their insulin system working for them, then we go to cortisol, then we go to testosterone, and then we go to thyroid. And each of those systems affect everything up the chain. Imagine a pyramid, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with the psychology of it. Think of a pyramid, a triangle. The bottom of the pyramid is your insulin system, which affects everything upstream. And then it goes cortisol, testosterone, thyroid. And if we could affect all of those hormone systems positively and getting working for us rather than against us, then we can mitigate a lot of the dad bod of the first 4 years of our kiddos' lives.
Awesome. So what are some of those things that you do to help your clients with their insulin system?
Great question. So insulin's relatively straightforward, but it will seriously change your life if you put these nutrition and lifestyle pieces together. And remember, I have a background in psychology, which means it's really important to me that we don't do everything but the kitchen sink all at once, because that won't stick. So when people first work with me, the insulin system is controlled by really 4 primary factors. 1, how much sugar are you eating in a day? The American Heart Association says that we should be eating less than 40 grams of sugar per day if we're looking to stave off heart disease. And so that's the first metric, is let's get less than 40 grams of sugar per day. Simple, count sugar, not asking anybody to count calories. Let's count sugar instead. Then 2, we're talking about fiber. Having a diet higher in fiber will actually mitigate the uptake of sugar into the bloodstream. Or in layman's terms, it makes the sugar that you eat have less of an effect on insulin. And insulin is really important. If we have lots of insulin in our system, it's the most anabolic hormone in our body. We'll build fat, and we will feel relatively unenergetic and dependent on carbohydrates as a fuel source. So we want to have low sugar, high fiber. We try to get 30 grams or more fiber per day. And then on the other side of things, 2 very simple habits is 10,000 steps per day and 100 ounces of water per day. 10,000 steps a day will keep us nice and insulin sensitive, so we don't have to have lots of insulin in our bloodstream. And 100 ounces of water is a nice, simple way for most people to get enough hydration. And the hydration is important in order to be able to break down the triglycerides in our bloodstream. So the people have talked about water being helpful in burning fat for a long time. The real reason for that is the chemical reaction that breaks down triglycerides into a usable form requires water. So if you're dehydrated, you're going to have a hard time tapping into your fat stores. So in short, sugar, fiber, steps, and water, and we'll get your insulin system working for you rather than against you on this old dad bod journey.
Yeah, that's not rocket science. It's not rocket science either. So, it's very simple to implement, and anybody out there listening to this can implement that right away. So we've got the insulin system, cortisol system, and what was the third one?
Testosterone, the important one.
Yep. So it's those 3 things in that order, right?
Absolutely. And then we actually go to a 4th, which is the thyroid hormone, the most metabolically active hormone in the body.
So let's dive into that a little bit. How do you help your clients with that system?
Yeah, so the thyroid system is pretty complicated in the sense that I call it the weakest chain in the endocrine system. It's the first hormone system to show signs that the rest of the hormone system is out of whack, which is pretty powerful and important because I have in my training career, the vast majority of female clients, especially, that come to me and say, hey, I'm on thyroid hormone replacement therapy. And I'm like, wow, how long have you been on that? And they're like, oh, 10 years. Oh, okay. And you still haven't lost the weight you want to lose? Oh, no. I'm like, why are we still taking this stuff? What's going on? Because, they went to the doctor and they said, hey, I'm having trouble losing weight. And my hair isn't as cool as it used to be. And I'm feeling really unenergetic. And the doctor will test them and say, well, everything's fine, but your thyroid hormone's a little off. Let's put you on some thyroid medication. And what happens is they take it, their thyroid hormone comes to normal, but those underlying systems, the insulin system, the cortisol system, the testosterone system, those aren't helping with the weight loss piece. And so it's not a thyroid problem. The thyroid's just the first one to show it, right? So how we help that system is really help the other hormone systems first. And then from there, it's relatively straightforward in that the thyroid gland is especially susceptible to food sensitivities. So for my clients who make it to the thyroid portion and have implemented the changes that help the other hormone systems, we start cutting out a few commonly inflammatory foods, and I ask them to get some food sensitivity testing if they're not seeing the weight loss that they like to see. So common food sensitivities include dairy. Dairy's in just about everything right now. So that's really, I'm not saying dairy's bad for everybody. I'm saying there are some people that have a really hard time with dairy and it shows up in their thyroid gland. Similarly, you have sensitivities to wheat are pretty common. And then nuts and eggs are also pretty common sensitivities that I run across. So we try to make sure that the sensitivities are taken care of. That doesn't mean you can't eat those things. It means that it helps to take a break from them and then to eat them sparingly after that, right?
Yeah.
The second thing that we can do for the thyroid hormone in that sense is to address the gut flora. And that means to introduce a probiotic and maybe some prebiotic fibers to help the gut restore the bacterial colonies that are in the actual gut lining. And that's a pretty powerful part of the thyroid because the thyroid creates hormones, but the small intestine is responsible for changing those hormones into the metabolically active version of them. So if your thyroid's pumping out good stuff, but your gut sucks, then your thyroid won't be working like it's supposed to with regard to your metabolism.
Yeah. And one thing that I'm noticing about everything you're talking about here is that you're helping your clients without the use of prescription medication. And one of my big beliefs is that we can cure a lot of our ailments by simply fixing our nutrition and our overall health. Am I understanding kind of your approach right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I'm passionate about and that I've worked really hard in my career to do is to help my clients to tap into their own body's ability to heal itself. And I don't mean that to sound, terribly Eastern or, Tibetan monkish, right? But there are instances that having a medication is really helpful. For instance, my aunt had a cancerous tumor on her thyroid, had to have the whole thing removed. Thyroid replacement therapy makes a lot of sense for her because she no longer has a thyroid gland. However, for many people who there's nothing wrong with their thyroid gland. They're just not sleeping well. They're eating like garbage. They're not exercising appropriately, and their gut's torn to hell because of a long time of eating the wrong way. Well, I'm sorry, but thyroid hormone replacement therapy is a Band-Aid over your bullet hole at that point.
Absolutely. And, I mentioned pre-show that I'm getting over bronchitis here, but, I don't think it's a coincidence that as soon as I started slacking just a little bit in my nutrition and some of my practices that I do on a daily basis, that lo and behold, after 2.5 years, I got sick again. So I definitely see a connection there.
Dang those holidays.
Yep. So anyways, I know that a big part of you mentioned, getting your gut health right. And that's something I definitely pay attention to. I drink my kabukas and, raw apple cider vinegars and all that type of stuff. I know there's a big, connection between gut health and, your mental health as well. Are you noticing the same thing within your clientele?
Absolutely. It's overwhelmingly interesting, I'll just say that, to find how much of our serotonin neurotransmitter is produced by the gut, for instance. So serotonin is an important neurotransmitter. It's one of the big four. And when somebody's depressed, for instance, and they go to a psychiatrist and they say, hey, I've had, suicidal thoughts and I feel like I can't get out of bed and stuff, they're going to be prescribed an SSRI, which is a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And what that does is it increases the amount of serotonin in the brain and helps to stabilize that feeling of depression, at least to support them as they come out of it naturally, right? But if our gut is responsible for producing 70% of that neurotransmitter, it's no wonder that for many people who are eating too much sugar, for instance, or not getting enough fiber, or aren't exercising in a way that promotes gut motility, if you are not addressing those issues and you're limiting the serotonin production possible by your gut, then what happens as a result is you have a lower amount of that in the brain area. And that's powerful and important to know. I'm not saying that all depression can be cured through nutrition and exercise, but I am saying that there are many people who experience depression who, if they lived just a little bit differently and incorporated a few things, that would go away for them and it would be powerful.
Yeah, we sometimes rely too much on our medication and just kind of get too busy to implement changes within our lifestyles. We just kind of go see our doctors every now and again, have our prescriptions re-upped, and never really cure the underlying issues that we may have within our own lifestyle.
And the most frustrating part about that is when we introduce an exogenous source of serotonin, for instance, as in an SSRI, we also bring ourselves into all of the side effects that are there, right? So most SSRIs have weight gain as a side effect of the medication. And it's interesting, I'll have people come to me and say, hey, Alex, I really want to lose weight. I really want to get rid of this dad bod, lose the body fat, that sort of thing. And when we dive into their medications, I have to be real with them and say, hey, as long as we're taking a large dose of this thing, it's going to be very difficult for you to lose the weight that you want to lose, because you are basically taking a pill that tells your body, hold on to this fat. And until we stop doing that, then we won't be able to get there. Now, I'm not saying if you're currently taking a medication with weight gain as a side effect, to stop it. Don't do that. I'm not a doctor, but I generally work with my clients' doctors to say, hey, the goal here in the next 16 weeks is to reduce this medication in a way that will allow me to see progress on this fat loss. And when you can do that, when you can live life in a way that makes your dependence on that medication less and less, then you can definitely redefine this whole dad bod thing.
Yeah, I was about to mention that the goal should be to eventually wean yourself off of the medications if possible. And, I'm hoping, that's one of my long-term goals throughout my life is to not be dependent on so many medications. Certainly had enough of a cocktail here recently with getting over bronchitis, but, that's a very short-term thing. But what other sort of mind-body connections? I know you mentioned pre-show that this is an area that you've been concentrating on. What are some of the key things that you've been discovering through that, I guess, research that you've been doing?
Yeah, in the Defining Dad Bod movement, in the podcast itself, I run through series, and they take some time, So for instance, we talked about the hormone pyramid. That's a series on the show called Overcoming Obesity. And there's 5 parts to that. If anybody's interested in diving deeper into that, I can send you a link to point people in that direction. But right now we're going through a series called Exercise in the Brain. And that we're looking at the past few decades of research and what kind of powerful effects that exercise has. And very, very simply, just exercise. I'm talking 20 minutes of cardio a day or 3 days a week of weight training, that sort of thing. Exercise has a powerful effect on the brain. And research has been done in the past 3 decades, again, that very few people are talking about. That, no pun intended, all right? We're dads, dad joke here. My mind is blown by this research, okay? By the research of exercise in the brain, just literally blown. So I'll give you an example. In one school, they were studying the effects of recess time on grades. And it was a school in Plano, Texas. And what they did is they tripled the kids' recess time, right? As you know, ADHD diagnosis is on the rise throughout the U.S. Right. And so there are a lot of kids who are basically put on the equivalent of crystal meth in order to help them sit still and focus in class. And that's the Adderall and Ritalin that are prescribed for these kids. And I'm not saying that if you're medicating your kid, you're wrong. I'm saying that there are many times it where a kid just probably needs a little bit more activity because sitting still is rough as a 7-year-old boy. So in these studies, they tripled the recess time. Okay, they get 45 minutes 3 times a day to just go outside and play on the playground. All right, unstructured recess time. And nothing else changed. Nothing else changed. They didn't change the curriculum. They didn't change the teachers. They didn't change anything. They just let the kids play more often. And you would think that with less study time and less lesson time, that the grades would go down. The school rocketed to the top 3 position in the state for test results and grades. It's astronomically mind-blowing how allowing kids to be more active in a day makes them better in school. Go figure. And that actually, fast forward to adulthood, right? That actually has been played out in adulthood as well. One of the interesting studies was the elevation of BDNF, that's brain-derived neurotrophic factor, in adult, both male and female, after 20 minutes of cardiovascular activity at a relatively high intensity. BDNF is important. You can think of it like the miracle grow of brain cells. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, my mom said, you can't grow your brain cells back, so don't kill them by watching TV or drinking alcohol. I love my mom, but she's not right. That's not how it works. You keep growing brain cells throughout your life, and that helps you to learn new things, and that helps you to create new skills and whatnot. But exercise increases BDNF by 300%, and it stays that way for several hours. And what they found when adult males and females exercised and then went and worked on a complex problem, it created increased cognitive flexibility. Or in other words, exercising regularly can make you better at your job, can make you a better performing individual with problem-solving tasks, and as a parent, can make you a little bit better at discipline. For instance, you come home from work and it's been a rough day. If you've exercised that day, you're much more likely to come up with smart solutions rather than saying stupid things like, everybody be quiet because dad needs quiet.
Yeah, that's really important because I definitely notice difference when I'm on my exercise game and when I'm not. So I'm definitely more attentive to my daughter when I'm exercising. I definitely notice a practical benefit to all of everything that you just mentioned there. So what else have you been diving into? I'm really getting you're really piquing my interest in this arena, I guess.
Well, with regard to exercise in the brain, we're tackling ADHD, we're tackling depression, we're tackling anxiety. But one of the other things that have been really interesting in the show and in the movement itself is we have been looking for real life examples in the community of moms and dads who have transformed their lives through health and fitness, and just diving into their story, like giving them an opportunity and a platform to say, hey, I used to weigh 100 pounds more than I should, and this is what I did, and this is how I got here, and here are the struggles, and they're really real with us, which is powerful. We've done over 40 of these interviews on our YouTube channel with in partnership with John Bauer from Bauer Power Fitness. Yeah. And the goal for me, from a movement perspective, it's powerful to give a platform and a voice to people who have really changed their lives in a powerful way. And it really helps those of us who, look at this and go, I don't know if I can do it. Alex is this trainer guy, whatever. And then you have, Joe Blow, who will tell you, I'm the average guy. If I can do it, you can do it. And you have no excuses. Man, that just kind of wipes your excuses off the board pretty hardcore.
Absolutely.
Stories. But for me, one of the things that I've found is that there's a couple of recurring themes when real people change their lives for the better. And one of those themes I think is really interesting and worth talking about is the decision to be an agent rather than a subject. It's the decision that life doesn't have to happen to me. I can make life happen. Or very simply, there's something I can do. No matter how small it is, no matter how big the problem seems to be, no matter how long it's going to take, there's still a small step I can take today in the direction of my goals. In that moment, you can hear it in every single story. You can hear, a guy gets a bad report from the doctor and he wakes up the next morning and goes to put his shoes on and he can't bend down deep enough to tie his shoes. And he goes, something's got to change. And it starts today. And he goes out for a barefoot jog around the block weighing 150 pounds more than he should. And that's the start of his fitness journey. Like that moment is just deeply powerful. And I think that is something that that we're really diving into in the show is how do we as people take that moment and live that moment every single day, where we wake up in the morning and we say, there's something I can do. There's a small step in the direction of my goals that I can take. And the other thing I'll say is that for parents, especially, since my work largely centers around parents, for parents especially, investing in our own personal health and fitness has an effect on our children. And not just like they see us differently, but most of the people you will talk to in this transformation series would say that their children pick up their habits, or they do what we do and not what we say. You have a 4-year-old, you know exactly what I'm talking about. She does exactly what you do, not what you say, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's been going with me on my rucks since she was probably 6 months old, barely able to hold herself up in the stroller. So she's been right there with me along with me on my fitness journey.
So I picture a world where a generation of parents live this health and fitness realm well. And I know it's hard. It's like a minefield to be healthy today. And there's messages coming at you from, all different directions. Count your calories and try this new app and do this thing, and eventually you kind of want to throw up your hands. But imagine a generation of parents who do this thing really well. We set bedtimes and we lift weights and we find cardio that we'll stick with, and we make this a discipline and we incorporate our kids. Imagine the generation of kids that come out of that. There's no more weight loss goals. So Weight Watchers loses their market share because nobody's trying to count points anymore. They're just healthy because they're healthy. And imagine what kind of impact that would have on the medical system if we're done chasing around preventable diseases like type 2 diabetes, for instance, and done paying for that sort of thing. And imagine how much more free our kids can be if, instead of having to muddle through this space of trying to figure out what's healthy and fit, which is what I feel like I've had to do and what many of the dads I've talked to have had to do, imagine they just get to be that way. And that's something that can be passed down through the generations, and hopefully they can spend that time and energy doing something else productive, like, I don't know, dealing with meteors that might hit the earth or populating other planets, or we can have a fun conversation about that too. But that's the goal. That's the vision.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to back up to, you mentioned that you've shared stories of some of your guests, previously, but you yourself have been through an interesting journey. I know you've been kind of fighting a genetic disorder kind of your whole life. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I said I didn't struggle with my health and fitness until I had a kiddo. That would actually be a pretty inaccurate sentence. I should have said I never struggled with my body composition until I had a kiddo, the whole Dadbod thing. But, before that, my health and fitness journey really has been a struggle. I have a genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos, and EDS is a connective tissue disorder where your tendons and ligaments or other connective tissues don't produce enough collagen. Mm-hmm. And in layman's terms, that means your tendons should be like Kevlar. They should be strong enough to really hold things together. Mine are more like gummy bears. And so that has created a plethora of issues in my life. I used to hang on the monkey bars and my wrists would pop out of joint. You could feel it. I'd hang and they kind of pop out of joint, and it's a little bit painful in the moment, but after you do that for a few years, things get worse and worse. So my clients have often been older than me, and they'll say things like, how can you train me? You're much younger than I am. And I'll say, yeah, my joints are way older than you though. So yeah. that has really impacted and influenced my training career. And I remember growing up seeing the effects of Ehlers-Danlos, and we didn't know what it was called 20 years ago. It had generated since then, but the diagnostic process for it was really shoddy. So I watched my mom, my grandma, and several other people in the family struggle with this hypermobility issue and the digestive dysfunction that comes along with it and the cardiovascular issues that come along with it. And, take pain pills and take a ridiculous amount of medication. I don't know how else to say it except to say, I looked at that and said, I don't want to just exist. Right. I don't want to just exist. I don't want to fight pain all my life. I want to live. I love this athletic stuff. I love being able to make decisions that don't keep me in a narcotic fog on the couch. And I want to pursue that. And so for my part, much of my health and fitness journey has been trying to address this genetic disorder that doesn't really have a cure and do it without the medical prognosis of pain management. And so, yeah, that's really been my journey. It's been a tough one.
Yeah. So how have you been able to mitigate that specifically? Maybe there's someone out there listening right now and maybe they're suffering from something like this. And, what advice that, can you offer them?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it would help if I spoke more broadly than just EDS. There are a lot of genetic predispositions out there, not just disorders, but predispositions themselves that really affect us. I did a show recently called How Are You Playing with the Hand You've Been Dealt? And in that show, I'm talking about the epigenetic effects of exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle. And so I have this cruddy hand of cards I've been dealt genetically. Okay. I have Ehlers-Danlos. What am I going to do about it? Well, you can't change the card. Okay. My grandpa would not let you change the card when he taught you how to play poker. You just played with that hand, right? And if you played poorly, well, you lost and grandpa took all your chips, and well, that's life, bro. And that's the same thing with regard to genetics. If you're lactose intolerant, or you do really cruddy with dairy, or you have the gene that requires you to sleep an extra hour in order to get your hormones in line, rather than your friend who can get away with 5 hours of sleep a night, you get to figure out how to make the best of that hand. And so for me, that means I've made decisions about my fitness journey that I might have decided differently if I had a different hand. I love to lift. I would love to get as big as possible. You can check out my pictures on social media. I am not the giant ripped physique competitor that many people would picture a 13-year trainer to be. I have maintained a certain level of muscle tissue to support my joints. And anytime I've ever lifted heavy, I always end up wrecking my joints over time. It's just not a great idea for my Ehlers-Danlos. And that means that I can't go powerlift in powerlifting competitions and beat everybody at their deadlift. That's just not going to be my thing, right? So I've had to make decisions about pursuing particular avenues of my health and fitness because of my genetics. I could say the same thing about nutrition. So nutritionally speaking, I love cheesecake, but dairy seems to tear up my stomach brutally. And with Ehlers-Danlos, anything that would normally tear up somebody's stomach, it's 10 times worse with the motility issues that happen with regard to small and large intestine. And so I have to say, because of my disorder, I'm not going to choose to eat some of the things that I would really enjoy otherwise. And that's really important. And I think many people would benefit from understanding their genetic makeup a little bit better and then making decisions about, hey, this is the hand I've been dealt. How can I play the best with it rather than letting it make me lose to grandpa in poker?
Yeah. And it's all about focusing on the things that you can control. And that's what it boils down to. I talk about that a lot. And, whether it's, dealing with genetic disorder or just dealing with coworkers at your work, you simply have to focus on the things you can control and not worry about the uncontrollables.
Yeah, and I think every single person you talk to, if you dug a couple layers deep, there's something that you couldn't blame them for curling up in the corner and just crying for the next 3 months. Like everybody has some tragedy or brutal reality. I truly believe this. I really do. I've spent a lot of time talking to people and a lot of time helping people through life. And if you dig a couple layers deep, there are, deaths that have happened in the family. There are diseases that are being hidden. There are, problems that are happening at home and whatnot. And you couldn't blame that person if they curled up in a corner and just cried about it for months, But, and here's the big but, here's the biggest but. You won't find it on Instagram, but here it is.
Yeah.
I couldn't help it. It's that most people don't do that. Most people don't curl up in the corner and cry about it for 3 months, and maybe we could do better, but there is a decision that we make to move forward despite the tragedy, despite the pain, despite the hardship. And I think that plays directly into what you're doing here with No Excuses. It's not that you don't have an excuse.
Yeah.
It's that you don't choose to let it rule you. And that, I think in there, somewhere in there, is the message of the Defining Dadbod movement as well. As, hey, biologically speaking, it seems like biology is against dad being a conscious, powerful human being with regard to his health and fitness. But you can choose to be a different kind of dad. You don't have to be the caricature of a guy who's scrolling through Facebook on his phone while his kids play on the playground because he has no energy. You don't have to be the guy who's afraid to take his shirt off at the pool because, hey, he's just got the dad bod, you know, like you don't have to be that guy. You can present something different. You can make dad bod mean something different for you. And I think that's really the core of the message.
Awesome. Well, Alex, we're starting to bump up against time here, but I wanted to leave a few seconds here at the end of the show for you to let folks know how to get in touch with you, where they can find the podcast, and if they wanted to reach out to you and get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate that. We're all over the internet. You can find us at definingdadbod.com. That's where the vast majority of our free offerings are. We've got podcasts, we've got blog posts, we have videos, that sort of thing. You can also find us on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel that you can find through the Defining Dadbod site. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, at Defining Dadbod if you prefer to follow in those ways. And last but not least, the free content that I put out, the ability to jump on a podcast and have a powerful conversation, or to bring you some research about exercise in the brain, that sort of thing. That's all supported through our Patreon account. And you can find that at patreon.com/Defining Dadbod.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again. This is a powerful conversation. Lots of knowledge dropped here, and appreciate every golden nugget that you dropped today, man.
Hey, man, I appreciate the time. Keep doing what you're doing.
Awesome, man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the Zero Excuses podcast. Join the conversation at kenyonzitska.com in our Facebook group. And don't forget to rate and subscribe to our show. We'll talk to you next week. And always remember, results, not excuses.